Welcome to today's HealthLine Innovator webinar from the American Association of Kidney Patients, titled A Promising Breakthrough for Kidney Patients Managing Hyperphosphatemia, sponsored by Ardelyx. My name is Jerome Bailey, and I am AAKP's Director of Patient Engagement and Advocacy. AAKP is pleased to host our Innovator webinar series, an extension of our normal HealthLine webinar programming. The content of this program, as presented, and financial support of this webinar is provided by Ardelyx. As the oldest and largest patient-led kidney patient organization in the U.S., AAKP is proud to host this innovative webinar as a service to our expanding national and global communities of patient consumers and their families, medical practitioners, researchers, and policymakers who are following innovation and advancements in kidney care and treatment. AAKP is an aggressive supporter of innovation to disrupt status quo kidney care, and we thank you again, Ardelyx, for sponsoring this important webinar. Before we begin, let's get started with a special message from our webinar sponsor. Welcome back. AKP's HealthLine and HealthLine Innovator webinars fall under our Center for Patient Research and Education. We believe patient and care partner education is an integral part of an individual's treatment, and to that end, AAKP is a champion for full patient care choice, the protection of the patient-doctor relationship, and the elimination of artificial barriers and government determinants of health that impede patient care choice and access to available treatment options. At AAKP, we work to ensure that patients have a central role in the research and innovation process so that unmet needs are identified and unique patient insights and lived experiences fully inform the research and product development cycle. This includes clinical trials to regulatory action and payment decisions. The field of kidney disease innovations has seen significant advancements in recent years, offering hope for the development of novel treatments for this chronic illness and its comorbid conditions that can address the pressing needs of our community. Today's exciting topic has gained momentum and is a focus of much interest for AAKP, kidney patients, and the kidney community at large. As researchers continue to push the boundaries of medical science, the field of kidney disease is poised for even greater advancements in the future. With a growing emphasis on personalized medicine and cutting-edge technologies, the possibilities for improving outcomes for patients with kidney disease are endless. We are thrilled to present today's program that provides a solution for a long-time unmet need of the patient community. Hyperphosphatemia, also known as high phosphorus levels, is a common issue affecting over 700,000 individuals in the US who are living with end-stage kidney disease. This condition involves an imbalance of electrolytes, specifically an excess of phosphate in the body. While dialysis is effective in managing electrolyte levels, it often struggles to adequately reduce phosphate levels to achieve a healthy balance. As a result, about 80% of dialysis patients need additional therapy to lower their phosphate levels, along with following a modified low phosphorus diet. Leading up to today's webinar, AAKP conducted an independent flash survey conducted through our Center for Patient Research and Education to learn how kidney patients are managing their phosphorus level. I'm delighted to share some of the results with you that will help set the stage for our speakers. The survey reached out to a wide range of respondents across our network. The vast majority of respondents shared that they managed their phosphorus level using phosphorus binders, although management through diet came in second. This insight speaks to the need for an alternative treatment to the often prescribed over-the-counter binders. Survey respondents were pretty evenly split in indicating the top three challenges they face regarding phosphate management includes remembering to take their phosphate binders after every meal, adhering to a restrictive diet that aims to lower phosphate intake, and pill burden faced by having to take so many binders throughout the day. An astounding 93% of respondents said that they are not aware of any different medications to help lower their phosphorus, even with new treatments coming to market. This is precisely one of the reasons AAKP hosts these innovative webinars, so individuals can gain knowledge about all available treatment options and then discuss with their healthcare team what's right for them and their care plan. And finally, when we asked what improvements you would like to see in the management of hyperphosphatemia, the top three responses included lowering the cost of medication and treatment, a more effective medications with fewer side effects, and better patient education and resources about phosphate management and available treatments. We want to thank everyone who took the time to provide feedback on our survey. It is clear that there is a significant need for more education and awareness surrounding the management of hyperphosphatemia to help improve an individual's quality of life. Now to our first speaker. Dr. David Spiegel is a national and international figure in nephrology. Prior to joining Ardelyx as Vice President of Nephrology, Dr. Spiegel served as the global lead for clinical development for the nephrology therapeutic area of Vifor Pharma and Executive Medical Director of Nephrology for Auryxia. Before entering the pharmaceutical industry in 2013, he was a professor of medicine at the University of Colorado Health Sciences Center and served as the medical director of the ESRD and CKD programs. During his academic time, he contributed to important research in advancing the field of calcium and phosphate metabolism in CKD and its role in vascular calcification and cardiovascular disease. Dr. Spiegel, thank you for joining us. I turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Jerome, for that very kind introduction. And on behalf of myself and Ardelyx, I certainly want to thank the AAKP for everything they do in terms of patient education and patient advocacy. It's really my pleasure to speak with you today about phosphate and why it is that a different approach to the treatment of phosphate and hyperphosphatemia may be needed. So today we're going to take a closer look at high serum phosphorus. So on this slide on the left, we see that phosphorus, which is often designated as this capital P, is an essential mineral to help our body function. And actually, if we think about it a little bit more, phosphorus it makes up the backbone of our DNA. It's important for bone structure and bone health, and it's important in muscles. And actually, phosphorus is involved almost as the battery of our bodies. It's how we store and transfer energy. So as you can see, phosphorus is essential for life, both for us and for plants and animals. And that, therefore, almost anything we eat, whether it's a plant-based source of food or an animal-based source of food, contains phosphorus. And that is part of the problem that we're going to talk about today. An added problem that we all face, but particularly patients who have kidney disease and those who are on dialysis, is there are a number of phosphate additives that are now added to food for reasons to enhance their flavor or to preserve their shelf life. And these phosphates are very highly absorbed and contribute to the amount of phosphate that everyone, but particularly patients with kidney disease, are exposed to. How does high phosphorus happen? Where do we get the phosphorus and why does it go high in people with kidney disease? Well, we tend to be very good at absorbing phosphorus from the foods that we eat. Now, certain foods have more phosphorus than others, and some foods, the phosphorus is more available. It releases the phosphorus better than others and is better absorbed. But essentially, the bottom line is we're really good at digesting the food and absorbing the phosphorus from that food. And when that phosphorus gets absorbed, it goes into the blood. And if we need some of that phosphorus to build bone or to build muscle, it goes there. But if we don't need it for those purposes, then it's really the responsibility of the kidney and the role of the kidney to excrete that extra phosphorus and keep us in what we call balance. Balance being the difference, if you will, between what we take in, what we need, and what we excrete. And normally, if the kidneys are healthy, the kidneys are very good at maintaining our balance of phosphorus, so we don't have too much in the body and we don't have too little in the body. So it's pretty clear how the important role of the kidneys, and when the kidneys aren't working properly, they can't excrete phosphorus, and phosphorus tends to build up in the body. Now, in medicine, we like to give big words to things that happen. And so when there's too much phosphorus in the blood, we call that hyperphosphatemia, and you'll probably hear that term used often. So it's important to become familiar with your phosphorus goal. And let's talk a little bit about that in a little more detail. So most nephrologists aim to get their patients' phosphorus level to 5.5 or less. And that's the level of phosphorus that we measure in the blood. Now, there have been a couple of sets of guidelines that have come out to help nephrologists understand what that target should be. And actually, the most recent set of guidelines that came out, which was an international set of guidelines, suggested that we should try to help our patients get their serum phosphorus level to actually the normal range. And as you see on this slide, the normal serum phosphorus range is 2.5 to 4.5. So that's a little bit lower than what most nephrologists shoot for. Now, you can argue, why do most nephrologists shoot for 5.5 or less and not trying to get it toward normal? And I think most of you probably know the answer, right? It's very hard to get the phosphorus to 5.5 and less or lower, and it's even harder to get it to this normal range. So I think what's very important for everybody is to speak to your nephrologist to understand what their goals are, and also in consideration of what your goals are, and to understand how you can work together to try to achieve the best phosphorus target for you. And also understand how often it is to track your phosphorus and know your levels over time. So what are the steps we use? What are the ways that we use to try to control serum phosphorus in people with kidney disease on dialysis? And here you see the three traditional steps that we use. On the left, you see that diet is very important. And as we mentioned early on, right, all foods tend to contain some phosphorus. And it's important then to try to understand which foods have a lower serum phosphate content, while also taking in foods that are important for our health in terms of protein and calories. It even gets a little more complicated than that, because some foods release their phosphorus very quickly to the body, and some foods don't release it as well. So this issue of trying to understand the diet and how much phosphorus one is exposed to in eating, it gets very complicated. And fortunately, there are some resources that you have. One is your nephrologist, and the other resource is the renal dietitian, right? Those are experts in trying to understand the complexity of the food and trying to help counsel you on what foods you might eat and what foods are best avoided to try to reduce your dietary phosphate intake. The other way we manage phosphorus is by dialysis itself. Dialysis treatments remove phosphorus, and they're actually pretty good at removing phosphorus. But keep in mind, most people who are on dialysis, especially hemodialysis, they dialyze 3 times a week on average for about 4 hours, somewhere between 3 and 5 hours with each dialysis treatment. And while that is a lot of time to spend hooked up to machine, you have to remember that the healthy kidney works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and doesn't take any vacation or holidays. So it's not surprising that even with adequate dialysis and working on the diet, that those two are usually not enough to control the serum phosphorus level. And therefore, most nephrologists and most patients are prescribed phosphate binders, which are medicines that do exactly what the name says. They bind up some of the phosphorus that's released from the food and prevent it from getting absorbed into the blood. So with those 3 approaches, with diet control, adequate dialysis, and phosphate binders, you might think that our problem is solved, right? That it should be easy to control the serum phosphorus. And this slide really reports on a study that looked at that. It looked at how well we control serum phosphorus using those 3 tools. And this 70% here are actually the percent of patients that were unable to consistently get their serum phosphorus to this less than or equal to 5.5 and keep it there for 6 consecutive months. So I guess the good news here is if you feel like you're having trouble controlling your serum phosphorus, you're not alone, actually. 7 out of 10 patients have trouble consistently getting their serum phosphorus to even the target of less than or equal to 5.5 milligrams per deciliter. So if that's how we're doing, if that's the results that we're achieving today, I think it makes sense that we need to look for different ways to lower serum phosphorus to help people achieve their phosphate goal. So this slide sort of looks at what we've had traditionally and what's now available. So on the left-hand side of this slide, above that dark gray bar, you see what's called phosphate binders. And under each of these medication names, you see the year that they became available on the market. Now, just for full disclosure, I was practicing even to the left of this curve. So I remember really when all these medications came onto the market. And it was good that new medicines came on the market because they provided obviously new options for patients, and they provided patients with different choices. And each of these medicines has some benefit, and each of them have some side effects. And some patients tolerate one better than the other. And so at least having choices gave patients and physicians options to use different binders to try to pick the best medicine for a given patient. But obviously, despite all these binders, as we mentioned in the previous slide, still 7 out of 10 patients have been unable to achieve consistent control of their serum phosphorus. So on the right-hand side of the slide, now we see what's called Xphozah, which is not a phosphate binder. That's why it's separated from the others in terms of the space on the slide. And it's actually a phosphate blocker. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And it became available on the market in the end of last year, so the end of 2023, and it is indicated as add-on therapy to phosphate binders. So at the bottom here, you see what the indication is for the treatment with Xphozah, and that is this tablet, which is 30 milligrams twice a day, is a prescription medicine that's used to reduce serum phosphorus in adults with chronic kidney disease on dialysis as add-on therapy when phosphate binders do not work well or when phosphate binders cannot be tolerated. So let's look a little bit more in terms of how binders work and how that's different than how Xphozah, which is a phosphate blocker, works. So this slide in this little cartoon shows you how phosphate binders work. And in some ways, it's nice to think of them as a sponge because they do, like a sponge, where a sponge soaks up a liquid, say water. Phosphate binders soak up some phosphorus in the gut, in the intestinal lumen, and prevent it from getting absorbed. But like a sponge, if you think about it, if you have a big spill and you have a little sponge, that sponge soaks up some of the water, and then the sponge becomes saturated and it can't soak up anymore. So if you have a big spill, you need a lot of sponges to try to soak up that spill. And phosphorus is actually like a big spill, right? We end up taking in a lot of phosphorus. So one of the characteristics of phosphate binders is we tend to need a lot of them. The other thing that's where binders are similar to a sponge is if you think about it, if you spill your water in the living room and your sponge is sitting in the kitchen, that sponge doesn't do you any good in the kitchen for the spill in the living room, right? You obviously have to go get that sponge from the kitchen and bring it to where the spill is for it to work at all. And that's also sort of a characteristic of phosphate binders. They need to be present in the gut where the phosphate is being released from the food in order to bind it up. And it's for that reason that patients who are taking phosphate binders tend to be prescribed phosphate binders with every meal or with every snack. And it's very important to eat them either just right before or during the meal so that they're present in the gut to bind some of that phosphorus that's released. So that's kind of how phosphate binders work. And that's, I think, a very good analogy to think of it as a sponge with the limitations that a sponge has. So let's look at Exfosa, which is not a phosphate binder, but a phosphate blocker. And the cartoon on the right kind of is a schematic maybe of how Exfosa works. So if you think of this highway, which is pictured here, this would be the highway that takes phosphorus from the intestinal lumen, from the gut, into the blood. And what Exfosa does is it essentially tells the cell to put up these roadblocks. And if you think about it, right, the police go around, say, and they put up a roadblock so people don't go down the road. And the police don't need to stay there all day and tell people not to go. Once the roadblock is up, right, it prevents people from going down that road throughout the day. So Exfosa, if you will, works like a roadblock, preventing phosphorus from going in from the gut lumen into the blood. And it's taken twice a day. And when it's taken twice a day, it works throughout the day like this roadblock, blocking some of the phosphate absorption from going from the gut into the blood. So again, the roadblock analogy, which is very different from a sponge analogy, kind of, I think, helps us understand how Exfosa is different than phosphate binders. So this slide has a lot of words on it, but it's sort of the high-level safety information about Exfosa. And anytime you have a new medicine, obviously it's very important to understand the safety and tolerability of that medicine. So as we mentioned, Exfosa, one tablet, which is a 30 milligram tablet taken twice a day, is a prescription medicine used to reduce serum phosphorus in adults with chronic kidney disease on dialysis as add-on therapy when the phosphate binders do not work well or when the phosphate binders cannot be tolerated. There's some important things to know about Exfosa, and that is Exfosa may result in softer stools or more frequent bowel movements, and Exfosa certainly should not be given to children less than 6 years of age. And also, Exfosa should not be given to anyone with a suspected bowel blockage. Also, before taking Exfosa, obviously it's important that you talk to your healthcare provider and make sure they understand your medical condition, right? And it's also important to talk to them about whether you're pregnant or planning to become pregnant, whether you're breastfeeding or plan to breastfeed. And also, it's important that you know and your physician knows that you should not take Exfosa with a stool softener or a laxative. And the reason for that is, as we mentioned, Exfosa tends to soften the stool and tends to increase the frequency of bowel movements. And therefore, you don't want to have the additive effect of the stool softener or the laxative along with Exfosa, at least until you know how Exfosa works for you or what changes you experience in your bowel movements when you're on Exfosa. Obviously, as with all medicines, you should talk to your doctor about the medicines you're taking, and that includes both your prescription medicines and the over-the-counter medicines you take, including vitamins and herbal supplements. Now, Exfosa can have some side effects, right? We mentioned before that it softens the stool and increases bowel movement frequency, and so diarrhea can occur, and it is the most common side effect in patients on Exfosa, and sometimes it can be severe. And if you have severe diarrhea, you should certainly contact your healthcare provider, contact your physician, and let them know that's happening. You should do that pretty quickly if you're really having severe diarrhea. Also, it's possible that other side effects could happen, which may not be listed here, even though diarrhea was really the main one and the only one that occurred consistently in the clinical trials. But you should call your doctor, obviously, anytime you feel like you have a side effect from Exfosa or any medicine for that matter. And at the bottom of this screen, you see a number for the FDA and also a website for the FDA. And this is a website where you can go in and you can report a side effect from Exfosa or a side effect from any medicine that you're taking, because it's important even after medications are on the market and even after they're approved for use, that we continue to track them over time to make sure that the long-term safety is good. So that's true for Xphozah, just like it is for any other medication that gets released onto the market. So let's look a little more at Xphozah itself, and I want to draw your attention to the picture on the right. So this is a normal person's hand holding an Xphozah tablet, and I think from this picture you get the idea of the size of the pill, right? And so this is a 30 milligram Xphozah tablet. It's kind of this oval red colored pill, and the dose is one pill twice a day, one pill taken generally just before the morning meal, and one pill taken before the evening meal. Again, it's important to stop the stool softeners or laxatives before you start taking Xphozah. And also, it's probably a good idea not to take Xphozah right before a hemodialysis session. And the reason for that is because you may experience diarrhea, or you may just have to have a bowel movement within a couple of hours of taking Xphozah. And obviously, if you're on hemodialysis, right, you don't want to have to come off the dialysis machine to use the bathroom. So if you go to dialysis early in the morning, don't take your Xphozah right before dialysis. Maybe wait and take your first dose of Xphozah after your dialysis treatment when you come home with either lunch or your snack. And then the second dose would be taken before the evening meal. Like so many medicines, if you miss a dose completely, so say you miss your morning dose, and if you get to take it at lunch or you're out during the day and now it's dinner time, the recommendation is not to double up on the medicine, right? So don't take two pills at bed or with the evening meal, just take one pill with the evening meal. And obviously it's important with Xphozah not to adjust the dose without speaking to your doctor. And I think that's an important point for patients to remember, because I know a lot of you are very familiar with your phosphate binders, and sometimes you adjust your binders a little bit based on what you're eating and based on what the phosphate content of that food may be. So that's not something we want you doing, and not something you should be doing with Xphozah. Xphozah is one tablet twice a day, and that's the maximum dose. So again, what are some of the potential side effects of Xphozah? And again, the main one that's seen in all the clinical trials and in practical experience has been diarrhea. Most of it is simply a looser stool or more frequent bowel movements. As I say, this was the most common side effect. And most of the patients who experienced it noticed that the diarrhea was either mild to moderate, but as I said, sometimes it could be severe. And if it's severe, you should definitely let your healthcare provider know. In general, if patients experience diarrhea, it tended to happen soon after they started Xphozah, and it tended to go away if they stayed on the medicine even at the same dose, or sometimes with the dose reduction that your doctor may prescribe. And typically, even though the diarrhea, if it was going to occur, tended to occur early, it can occur at any time during Xphozah treatment, and that's important to keep in mind. So again, it's important to know the potential side effects, but it's also important to know that when we say diarrhea, most of it is loose stool or more frequent bowel movements. Most of it is mild to moderate. But again, if you develop more severe diarrhea, you should contact your healthcare provider. Xphozah is a different way to help lower the serum phosphate levels. I'm excited about it because when I was practicing medicine, I struggled like you do and like most nephrologists do to help most of my patients control their serum phosphorus. And my success and my patients' success was probably very similar to yours. 7 out of 10 patients had difficulty getting to the target even of 5.5, and it was even harder to get patients to normal. So now we have essentially another tool in our toolbox. It can be added to phosphate binders, or they can be used in different ways in combination to hopefully help more patients achieve their serum phosphate target. And I'll stop there and turn it back over to Jerome, our moderator. Thank you, Jerome.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Spiegel. Really good presentation. But before we move on to our next speaker, we did have a few people who registered for today's webinar submit questions that they would like you to respond to. So I'll move forward with asking you those questions. The first question is, what causes the body not to regulate phosphorus?
So that's an important question. And again, it's really the kidney that is the primary regulator of serum phosphorus. The gut or the gastrointestinal tract absorbs the phosphorus, but it's not very good at regulating how much phosphorus comes in. So that's really dependent upon the food we eat and how much phosphorus is in that food. And the gut doesn't control that very well. So all that phosphorus comes into the system, and the healthy kidney is very smart, at getting rid of any phosphorus we don't need and keeping us in balance. So when the kidney doesn't work properly, phosphorus tends to build up in the blood, and patients tend to develop hyperphosphatemia.
This question comes in from a care partner. She asks, is Exfosa non-constipating? My husband is on dialysis with high phosphorus and has a problem with high phosphorus levels.
Yeah, so before I talk about Exfosa, I think it's important to think about phosphate binders. We mentioned there's a lot of them on the market, and different binders tend to have different side effects. And some binders tend to be very constipating for some patients. And some patients who are on dialysis have constipation even just without their binders, if you will. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But Exfosa does not tend to cause constipation. It actually tends to have the opposite effect. It tends to soften the stool and increase the bowel movement frequency. So it would not be expected for Exfosa to cause constipation.
And another question, how can patients get access to Exfosa?
So Exfosa is a prescription medicine. So so your doctor needs to prescribe it. And if they don't prescribe it and you're interested in it, I think it's very reasonable for you to have that conversation with your physician. Obviously, your physician and your dietitian, they know the disease state and they know the science, but they don't know how you feel, and they don't know whether you're having really problems with your binders or how much taking all those binders might interfere with your life and your activities of daily living. So if they don't talk to you about Exfosa, right, it's very reasonable for you to talk to them about Exfosa. And then, in that conversation, if they decide that Exfosa is a good medicine or the right medicine for you to try, then they would submit a prescription through a specialty pharmacy, which they can find on the Ardelyx website. And then what would happen is that pharmacy will actually contact you either by phone or by text. So it's very important that if you have that discussion with your physician and they're going to prescribe Exfosa for you, that it's important to be aware that you're going to get a phone call or a text from a pharmacy. Now, we all get all these phone calls from people we don't know or these texts from people we don't know, and we tend to ignore them. But if you're expecting a potential phone call from a pharmacy about Exfosa, you may want to answer some of those calls from unknown numbers, I guess, if you will. And then that pharmacy will work with you, one, in terms of how to communicate with you going forward in the future, but also work with you and helping you get that Exfosa delivered to you. And then also there's a website you can go to called www.exfosa.com to find out more information about how you can get Exfosa and how you can talk to your physician about Exfosa.
Thank you again, Dr. Spiegel. I know we are all excited to learn of a new drug to help patients manage their phosphorus level. Next, we are joined by Richard Staswick. Richard is an AAKP ambassador and a home hemodialysis patient who has experience with managing his phosphorus through Exfosa. Richard is a retired professor who has been living with kidney disease since he was 22 years old. Between then and now, he has been on in-center hemodialysis twice for a total of 2 years and received 2 kidney transplants, which lasted a combined 37 years. His second transplanted kidney developed a cancerous tumor, which had to be removed in the summer of 2022, leading him to now begin being on home hemodialysis. During the past 40 years, Richard and his wife were fortunate to have 2 children and deeply fulfilling careers. At present, he is on the Patient Advisory Council for the Kidney Project, a potentially revolutionary development in treating kidney failure via an artificial implantable kidney. AAKP has been an official partner of the Kidney Project since 2018. We are honored to have Richard join us to share his experience. Richard, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it.
So, to get us going, let's jump right into it. Please tell us about your journey with kidney disease. What was the cause of your kidney disease? And can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with dialysis?
As you had already mentioned, my kidneys failed when I was 22 years old. which it was a big surprise to me. I had no idea that I had any kidney problems. I had no symptoms that I could see or feel, and so I the doctors I saw, what they said was had idiopathic glomerular nephritis. In other words, they don't know why my kidneys failed. So I went on dialysis the first time, which was in center, and it basically worked. I was on it for a year, and it seemed to be going fine. Uh, I was a little tired afterward, after each session, but otherwise, I was able to function, hold a job, and do everything else. So, not too bad on that experience.
What were you told about hyperphosphatemia? What's your target phosphorus at this time? And did it change based on your treatment?
Well, I know that, phosphorus levels should be somewhere between 2.5 to 4.5 for a normal person. However, I was told that dialysis on its own most likely will not be able to control my phosphorus levels, which in fact turned out to be true. And so I had to go on phosphorus binders. Uh, Now, I would like to keep it around 4.5 or lower, the higher end, but I struggled keeping it at that level um, with just phosphorus binders. My phosphorus levels would go up to 5.8, 6, 6.2. So I was never able really to have it at normal.
Based on your experience, how important is managing your phosphorus relative to other things that you have to manage?
Well, from my understanding of what I've been told and what I've read about it, is that it can have serious consequences on one's health and well being, in particular with hypophosphatemia. Um you can get calcium deposits, which are removed from your bones, and so you can get brittle bones. You could have a heart attack, stroke, lots of serious events can take place that can impact your life. Um, Oftentimes, though, with hyperphosphatemia, you don't feel or see any symptoms at all. It can be a quiet killer in that way. But it also causes hypocalcemia, um, which does have uh, various different side effects that you can experience. So you can get muscle cramps, uh, brittle bones, dry skin, itching, all of which can cause serious problems.
Please tell us about what happens after your monthly phosphorus lab draws.
What happens is I get a readout of all my various uh, phosphorus, potassium, red blood count, etc. That my doctor goes over with me, so we know where we're at, um, and generally then may alter or tweak my various medications I'm on.
And so, what happens if your phosphorus is above goal? What were you told to do? And can you give us an indication of how often that may happen?
It was a pretty regular basis, actually, where it was higher than normal, and sometimes well higher than normal. And so, what would happen then is we would try different kinds of phosphorus binders. Like right now, I'm on calcium acetate, um, but I've been on several others before. So, we just looked for another answer, and actually, were never able to achieve lower phosphorus, even though my diet was I was very careful with my diet. I avoided all dairy products, which I still do, and still it was a problem.
So when your phosphorus was above gold, how did that make you feel?
Like I said, it's the only symptom I had was the itching, and so it didn't make me feel weaker, didn't make me feel worse in any way. So that's the problem with it is you don't often know you have it unless you take the blood test.
What were your thoughts about hearing that Ardelyx was bringing a new phosphorus drug to the market that could help patients? And how would you encourage fellow patients to inquire with their healthcare team, if this new treatment is right for them?
I was very excited about this. It was potentially a breakthrough kind of medication that might work well for everyone. So I was more than happy to try it once I heard about it. And I brought it up to my doctor, said I had heard about it at actually an AAKP meeting that we had. Uh, and he was more than happy to have me try it. So I've been on it now for 4 months. And indeed, I've been experiencing much lower phosphorus levels around 4 um, rather than 5 to 6.
Uh, so, can you talk about why innovation in this space is important to you, and why is it important that all patients have access to safe, FDA approved treatments?
Well, dialysis on its own it keeps us alive, but we still have other problems like high phosphate levels. Um, So it's important that we keep on innovating, not only in terms of the dialysis treatments themselves, but also medications that can help to keep our phosphorus levels, potassium low, and other kinds of things. So, no, it's vitally important to have the FDA continue to support new innovations coming out. Uh, this is one example of one that's actually been working quite well.
Richard, I appreciate your time. We do have a couple of questions that were sent in by people who registered to participate in this webinar. I'd like to ask you those questions. The first question is, how often are you looking at phosphorus labs and why?
It's a monthly basis every month. It's important to keep track of the phosphorus levels so that they don't get out of control and cause lots of other problems. So, yeah, I draw bloods on a monthly basis, send them in, and I get the results usually within a few days after sending them in.
And what has been your experience accessing Exfosa and having the medication shipped to you?
It's been seamless. I've really been happy with the fact that the medication shows up at my door once a month. There's nothing I really have to do other than confirm that I could use another refill. But it's been great. I don't have any complaints at all.
Good. And one last question. Any advice for other patients who may be, having a challenge with managing their phosphorus level?
Well, I think they should do some research on Xphosa and talk to their doctors about it. I don't know if all the nephrologists around the country are aware of Xphosa, but it's also up to the patients to educate themselves about it so they can share information. And I think one of the ways they could do that is through AAKP, for example, through these kinds of seminars.
Well, Richard, thank you for sharing part of your kidney journey with our audience today. And thank you for your thoughts on the importance of bringing new drugs to the market to help kidney patients manage their phosphorus levels. If anyone watching has additional questions for our speakers or about today's webinar that we were unable to get to, please email us at info@aakp.org, noting the webinar title in the email subject line. In closing, if you are not already a member of AAKP, we encourage you to join. AAKP offers free membership to patients and their family members, as well as living kidney donors. To become a free member, join online at aakp.org/join or by phone at 1-800-749-2257. To receive all the benefits of membership, please be sure to include your email address when signing up. As an AAKP member, you will be notified about all of AAKP's upcoming events, the latest in our educational program series, and when opportunities arise where your opinions and experiences are needed to help inform innovation, advance care, and make a meaningful impact to improve lives. We encourage you to respond to our flash surveys and other engagement opportunities to help us elevate the independent patient voice and change the status quo kidney care. You will also receive a digital subscription to our bi-monthly magazine, AAKP Renal Life, and can select to receive any of our 5 different electronic newsletters, all for just signing up. We also invite you to check out our blog to read some great articles and patient profile stories, and follow us on social media for all the latest news and to keep up on what's trending. AAKP is dedicated to helping kidney patients across the disease spectrum understand their condition and take control of their health care. We are proud to offer a variety of resources for both patients and care partners. By visiting our website at aakp.org and clicking on the AAKP Store button at the top of the homepage, you can find a variety of educational brochures and online tools to order or download free of charge, including titles such as the Understanding the Food Nutrition Facts Labels booklet or the Bone and Mineral Disease Information webpage. You can also order materials by phone. AAKP has a number of exciting events planned for 2024, including our 6th annual Global Summit on Kidney Disease Innovation, hosted in partnership with George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences, which will take place virtually July 16th and 17th. AAKP's 49th annual National Patient Meeting will be a hybrid using AAKP's sophisticated virtual event platform with the in-person component taking place September 25th through the 27th at the Rosen Plaza Hotel in Orlando, Florida. The National Patient Meeting is the largest kidney patient conference in the U.S. with a growing international audience, features a diverse lineup of speakers across all sectors of the kidney community, including the top influencers in kidney care from the U.S. federal government, medical professionals, academia, private industry, and nonprofit professional organizations in the kidney community. An exhibit hall allowing participants to engage with various kidney-related companies and organizations, and various other networking opportunities. Book your room today. And our 7th annual Policy Summit is scheduled to take place November 20th at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and will allow for virtual participation. Registration for all 3 events is now open. And finally, you can also visit our YouTube channel to watch a number of great presentations and webinars, all available on demand from our 2023 events and programs, as well as 2024 programs as they occur. And once again, we'd like to thank Ardelyx for supporting today's HealthLine Innovator webinar. And thank you to Dr. David Spiegel and Richard Staswick for your participation. To our audience, thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day.